Bank Negara maintains OPR at 1.75%. Biden to assume US presidency amid deep division and raging COVID-19 pandemic. You're watching Nightline. We begin with this story. Democrat Joe Biden will be sworn in as the 46th President of the United States on Wednesday, assuming the helm of a country beset by deep political divides and battered by a raging coronavirus pandemic. The 78-year-old, who has vowed to restore the soul of America, is expected to call for American unity at a time of crisis in his inaugural address. Biden will become the oldest US president in history at a scaled-back ceremony that has been largely stripped of its usual pomp and circumstance, due both to the coronavirus as well as security concerns following the January 6 assault on the US Capitol. With only a small number of attendees present, the Democrat will take the oath of office before US Chief Justice John Roberts at 1 a.m. Malaysian time. The ceremony will unfold in front of a heavily fortified US Capitol, where a mob of Trump supporters stormed the building 2 weeks ago. According to advisors, Biden will waste little time trying to turn the page on the Trump era, signing a raft of 15 executive actions on his first day in office on issues ranging from the pandemic to the economy to climate change. The orders will include mandating masks on federal property, rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, and ending Trump's travel ban on some Muslim-majority countries. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has finally left the White House for the final time of his presidency on Wednesday, ahead of the inauguration of Joe Biden, leaving behind a legacy of chaos and tumult and a nation bitterly divided. Trump emerged from the building at 8:20 a.m. local time and strode across the South Lawn, where he gave his final words, before boarding Marine One, heading to join Base Andrews.
Great honor, the honor of a lifetime. Greatest people in the world and the greatest home in the world. I call it a home. We've had an amazing 4 years. We've accomplished a lot.
He will then board Air Force One and head to his private Mar-a-Lago club in Palm Beach, Florida, where he will retire with a small group of former White House aides. The 74-year-old is the first president to snub his successor's inauguration since 1869. Earlier, in his farewell video message, the 45th US president said he worked arduously for the American people, framing his presidency as one that championed the forgotten, while making no apologies for his brazen approach to politics. He asserted that his administration had restored American strength at home and American leadership abroad.
Now, as I prepare to hand power over to a new administration at noon on Wednesday, I want you to know that the movement we started is only just beginning. There's never been anything like it. The belief that a nation must serve its citizens will not dwindle, but instead only grow stronger by the day.
4 years after standing on stage at his own inauguration and painting a dire picture of American carnage, Trump departed office twice impeached, with millions more out of work and 400,000 dead from the coronavirus. Early on Wednesday, Trump pardoned 73 people, including his former aide Steve Bannon, among scores of others including rappers, financiers and former members of Congress. The list of those pardoned, as well as 70 others whose sentences were commuted, was released by the White House in a statement during the early hours. Neither Trump nor his relatives were on the list. Bannon had been charged with defrauding people over funds raised to build the Mexico border wall, a flagship Trump policy. Rappers Lil Wayne and Kodak Black, who were prosecuted on federal weapons offences, were also granted pardons. Trump did not attempt to give himself a preemptive pardon and has not pardoned members of his family or Rudy Giuliani, his former personal lawyer with whom he has fallen out. On to some local news. Bank Negara Malaysia on Wednesday maintained the overnight policy rate OPR at 1.75% at its first Monetary Policy Committee MPC meeting for this year. In a statement, the central bank's MPC said it considered the stance of monetary policy to be appropriate and accommodative to create enabling conditions for a sustainable economic recovery. It added that growth for 2020 is expected to be near the lower end of the earlier forecasted range. For 2021, the impact will be less severe than that experienced in 2020, although near-term growth will be affected by the reintroduction of stricter containment measures. Meanwhile, headline inflation for 2021 is projected to average higher, primarily due to higher global oil prices. Given the uncertainties surrounding the pandemic, the stance of monetary policy going forward will be determined by the new data and information and their implications on the overall outlook for inflation and domestic growth. Economists, meanwhile, gave mixed reactions to the central bank's decision to keep the OPR rate at the current rate. However, if the current Movement Control Order MCO persists, it could be a different scenario, namely in the first half of this year. Nightline spoke to Bank Islam Chief Economist Dr. Afzanizam Abdul Rashid, who had this to say.
Economists were rather quite mixed on today's decision. This is simply because the uncertainty surrounding the COVID-19 and also the implementation of MCO and CMCO, which likely to have quite a significant impact in terms of economic activities. Looking at the policy statement, it shows that the Bank Negara has been quite cautious, and it did mention about the downside risk, which quite remain prevalent, in particular in respect to the rise in the infection rates for COVID-19. But at the same time, there is also efforts to implement the vaccination program, which would allow the reopening of the economy to happen more convincingly going forward.
Dr. Afzanizam was also asked about the outlook for the rate in the coming months.
But at the same time, the Bank Negara will continue to remain guarded in respect to the evolving economic outlook going forward. So in that sense, we believe chances of a potential reduction in the OPR in the months ahead is quite possible. And the main reason is none other to ensure that the economy will continue to be supported through various policy instruments, namely from the monetary policy through the reduction in OPR, and alongside with the supports from the fiscal measures.
The nation's daily COVID-19 cases breached the 4,000 mark once again, with 11 new deaths reported on Wednesday. Of the 4,008 new infections, 5 were imported cases. Selangor continued to dominate the state with the most daily new cases. More cases were being recorded in Kuala Lumpur, followed by Johor and Sabah. The first time the nation recorded more than 4,000 cases was 4 days ago, and that was 4,029 new infections. The 11 new deaths for the day, aged between 42 and 90, bring the death toll to 630. In the intensive care unit, there are 246 patients receiving treatment, with 96 of them requiring respiratory assistance. The Health Ministry also reported 60 new clusters on Wednesday, while total recoveries stood at 2,374 cases. Meanwhile, Health Director General Tan Sri Dr. Nur Hisham Abdullah on Wednesday stressed that the death of a government doctor who died while on duty was not due to COVID-19 or exhaustion, but rather due to an underlying illness. He clarified the matter concerning frontliner Dr. Ali Nur Hassan, who had passed away on Monday night. Taking to his Facebook page, Tan Sri Dr. Nur Hisham stated that the COVID-19 test done on the late Dr. Ali returned negative. The Health DG said Dr. Ali was admitted to Kuala Lumpur Hospital since early December last year due to another illness and had undergone several treatment sessions. He also urged people not to speculate on the passing of Dr. Ali Nur and respect his family members. He also sent his condolences to the family of the Health Ministry's medical officer. Earlier, a charity group called Squad Pengurusan Jenazah Malaysia had alleged on its Facebook page that Dr. Ali, a member of its group, had died due to fatigue while on duty. The group also posted a picture of what it said was the last picture of Dr. Ali. The long silent school bells rang today as many of these institutions reopened their doors for face-to-face lessons for secondary students sitting for 2020 public examinations postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Nationwide, some 400,000 Malaysian examination candidates made their way back to classroom on Wednesday morning after almost 4 months away. These candidates who will be sitting for the 2020 Sijil Pelajaran Malaysia SPM, Sijil Vocational Malaysia, Sijil Kemahiran Malaysia, Sijil Tinggi Persekolahan Malaysia, Sijil Tinggi Agama Malaysia and Diploma Vocational Malaysia, as well as other international level exams certified by the ministry from next month onwards, made their way back to over 2,400 secondary schools nationwide. Checks at schools across the nation on Wednesday saw many happy faces among the students who turned up despite the strict standard operating procedures in place. Under the watchful eyes of their teachers who were stationed at the entrances, students had their temperatures checked while ensuring physical distancing was maintained. Elsewhere in Kedah, a total of 32,386 students made their way back to the classrooms. A survey at SMK Datuk Said Omar in Alor Star found that teachers and students strictly abided by the standard operating procedures SOPs. Meanwhile, the first day of the face-to-face school session in Terengganu went smoothly, involving a total of 27,909 students, including more than 17,000 SPM candidates from 153 schools. In a survey at SMK Datuk Razali Ismail Kuala Terengganu, the State Education Department reminded all schools to keep students up to date with the new SOPs and to provide relevant information from time to time, so that all parties have full understanding of the new normal. Simultaneously with the school reopening on Wednesday, home-based teaching and learning (PDPR) was also implemented for all primary pupils and students from Form 1 to Form 5. Despite a few hiccups for some in carrying out the virtual teaching and learning at home, most parents and students were excited on the first day of their class. The recent surge in the number of COVID-19 cases has prompted the Education Ministry to keep the majority of pupils and students at home and have them follow lessons online, at least for now. Based on videos sent to us, the first day of school was relatively smooth, but not without challenges for some parents. Some of the students were up as early as 7 a.m. to prepare for class, even wearing their school uniforms, despite just being in the comfort of their own home. A few are still struggling to wake up that early, while others have to deal with certain distractions from siblings at home. Nevertheless, many were thrilled to see their teachers and friends, albeit only on the screens of their mobile phones or computers.
Hari pertama ni macam agak kelang kabut sikit sebab yang anak pertama dia ada kelas pagi, lepas habis kelas 8.40 abang dia pula kelas. Okey, lepas tu seterusnya kakak dia kelas sains dan untuk tengah hari ni pun ada juga untuk sekolah agama, sesi untuk sekolah agama pula.
Cik Ulen macam mana kakak rasa? Seronok tak?
Tak.
Tak seronok? Kenapa tak seronok?
Tak dapat jumpa kawan-kawan.
Tak dapat jumpa kawan-kawan. Tapi kakak faham tak cikgu ajar apa?
Faham?
So kakak buat tak kerja-kerja sekolah cikgu bagi?
Buat.
Teachers also had their own set of problems, such as dealing with technical difficulties and making the lessons interesting to keep their students attentive.
Ada seorang parents yang anak dia memang tinggal dengan nenek. Jadi nenek tak tahu apa kan tentang gadget. Jadi saya terpaksa pergi ke rumah untuk set upkan online class untuk dia masuk ke dalam kelas Google Classroom. Saya set upkan phone nenek dia sebab ibu bapa kan bekerja, pergi keluar. Jadi anak-anak terpaksa tinggal dengan nenek lah. Jadi saya pun terpaksa pergi ke rumah sebab kesian kat nenek tu kan.
According to some parents, the move to switch to PDPR was certainly a relief as it allows them to keep their children safe from the pandemic. However, others are also worried that the situation would prolong the challenges of home-based learning, will cause the children to be left behind in their education. Hopefully, with the current movement control order in place and everyone adhering to the rules and standard operating procedures, we can begin the pandemic curve back down and children will soon be able to return to school once again. Meanwhile, the Education Ministry will continue to monitor compliance with standard operating procedures in schools nationwide. Education Minister Dr. Razi Jidin said this through a post on his Facebook page after checking out the first day of the 2021 school session on Wednesday. Earlier, Dr. Razi had gone to review the operation of 2 schools in Putrajaya before attending the cabinet meeting. He was accompanied by Education Ministry Secretary General Datuk Yusran Shah Muhammad and Education Director General Dr. Habibah Abdul Rahim. The group visited students at Sekolah Menengah Kebangsaan SMK Putrajaya Precinct 5-1 and SMK Putrajaya Precinct 16-1. Dr. Razi added that the students looked excited for the first day of school and prayed for their success. We are going for a short break. When we return, international syndicate crippled with seizure of 11 million ringgit worth of drugs. In Kuala Lumpur, police have crippled an international drug smuggling and distribution syndicate with a seizure of at least 11 million ringgit worth of drugs. 6 suspects picked up were believed to be members of the ring, which used Malaysia as a transit point for their activities. Kuala Lumpur Deputy Police Chief Datuk Yong Lei Chu said the suspects were locals, aged between 29 and 58. They were nabbed in 6 police raids conducted nationwide.
Hasil siasatan, pihak polis mendapati pergerakan pengairan dadah yang dirancang oleh Syndicate mula dari selatan menuju ke utara semenanjung untuk dihantar ke luar negara melalui jalan laut. Dalam sebuah yang dijalankan ini, sebuah rumah sewa yang digunakan sebagai stor transit penyimpanan dadah telah berjaya dibongkar oleh pihak polis.
The raids and the suspects' arrest then ultimately led police to several vehicles belonging to the syndicate in the city centre, where several hundred kilograms of drugs were found. Among the seized drugs were around 100 kilograms of ketamine, worth 5.99 million ringgit, and about 60 kilograms of heroin, worth 5 million ringgit. Also seized were 6 vehicles worth 425,000 ringgit, 21 pieces of jewellery, 2 watches worth 88,500 ringgit and 423,829 ringgit in cash. Police believe the syndicate has been active since October last year. All the suspects have been remanded for 6 days from January 16th to facilitate probe. The good intentions of a 16-year-old turned into tragedy when he drowned after saving 3 children who had fallen into a creek in Kampung Peropok Tikat, Kelantan. It is understood that in the 5:20 p.m. incident on Wednesday, one Muhammad Azamuddin, one Aznan, was in front of his house when he saw 3 children aged between 10 and 14 years old drowning in the creek. The victim jumped in and managed to bring all the children to safety. The teenager, however, later drowned himself, believed to be due to fatigue. Kota Baru Fire and Rescue Station Operations Commander, Senior Fire Officer 2, Muhammad Zaidi Yahya said the department received a call about the incident at about 5:23 p.m. The victim was found at the bottom of the river at 6:38 p.m. The body was then handed over to police to be sent to the Raja Perempuan Zainab II Hospital for post-mortem. Still in Kelantan, a Form 4 student was charged in the Kota Baru Magistrates Court for allegedly raping a 12-year-old girl in June last year. The teenager was alleged to have committed the offence at a Tafiz, which was no longer in operation in Pasir Tumbuh. At the time the offence was allegedly committed, the accused was 15, while the victim was a 12-year-old girl. The charge was filed under the Penal Code, which provides for imprisonment of up to 20 years and whipping if convicted. However, as the teenager is still a minor, punishment in this case is subject to the Children's Act. The judge allowed the accused bail of 1,000 ringgit with 1 surety. The court set February 25th for remention of the case and for submission of documents. Pfizer vaccine found effective against new variant. This and more stories from the foreign front when we return. A latest study revealed on Wednesday that the COVID-19 vaccine developed by Pfizer and BioNTech is likely to protect against a more infectious variant of the virus discovered in Britain, which has spread around the world. according to the study that was published on preprint server BioRxViv. Prior to peer review, the results showed that antibodies in the blood of people who had been vaccinated were able to neutralize a version of the mutant virus that was created in the lab. Unlike the earlier study, which focused on one crucial mutation, the new research tested all 10 mutations located on the virus spike protein, which helps it bind to cells in the host. Last week, Pfizer said a similar laboratory study showed the vaccine was effective against one key mutation called N501Y, which was found in two highly transmissible new variants spreading in Britain and South Africa. A partial lockdown was imposed on the Chinese capital Wednesday, with 1.6 million residents banned from leaving Beijing after a handful of cases were detected. 7 cases were reported in the city of Wednesday, including 6 in southern Daxing district. According to authorities, 7 cases were reported in the city on Wednesday, including 6 in southern Daxing district. Following the lockdown orders, all residents of Daxing must not leave Beijing unless they have received special permission from the authorities and tested negative for COVID-19 in the past 3 days. Meetings of 50 or more people in the district have been banned, while weddings should be postponed and funerals simplified. It also ordered all kindergarten, primary and secondary students in the district to study at home. Now let's take a look at the highlights in Malaysia's main newspapers for Thursday, January 21st. The New Straits Times, Harian Metro and Berita Harian all focus on the new school year and its challenges for secondary students sitting for 2020 public examinations postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as for students and teachers who are doing home-based teaching and learning. Headlining the Malaysian Reserve, meanwhile, is an article urging the government to provide clear emergency action plan. Don't forget to get your copies or subscribe to the online newspaper. In South Africa, a French skydiver captured the moment when his 3 friends all managed to simultaneously freefall in a standing position through the clouds above the incredible view of Mossel Bay. Take a look as we wrap up Nightline this time around. I'm Arief Subhan. Thank you for tuning in and do take care.